Hello and good evening, I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. The government of Muhyiddin Yassin won a crucial victory today as the Dewan Rakyat greenlit a draft budget of 2021. Now, after 13 days of debate, the budget bill moved past the policy stage following a voice vote of lawmakers. There was, however, an attempt to call for block voting, which would have meant that every MP's vote would be counted. But it did not get sufficient support from the 15 MPs it needed. Only 13 MPs supported the block voting. Fahmi Fadzil, Lembah Pantai MP and PKR Communications Director, joins us on the show now. Good evening, Fahmi. Now, there's a list of names circulating of MPs that stood up to support block voting. Your name is missing from that list. Why didn't you stand up in Dewan Rakyat today?
There was the party had an instruction for us not to cast our block vote today, and the instruction came from opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim, and that was to allow the vote to, or rather this draft budget to pass the policy stage. This is due to several factors, among which some of the things that we had requested from Tengku Zafrul. I myself, for example, made a request for funds for non-MOH frontliners, and that was given. But at the same time, we reserve our full numerical objection to a later stage because contrary to what some media reported, the budget has not passed. It's just past the policy stage. After this, it will go into committee stage where every ministry will be scrutinized, and this is where we will have the opportunity to really look at what these numbers are. By one estimate, what Tengku Zafrul announced today amounts to something like between 200 and 300 million extra, or it's numbers that is moved around. So we need to see where these numbers are coming from and where they will be going exactly before we make a decision.
Fahmi, what's interesting is that I think for many people who've been watching the proceedings and the talk around Parliament this time might feel as that the goalposts have been changed somewhat or shifted. That there was a lot of talk about the legitimacy of the Perikatan National Government and the question of showing numbers, of forcing the government today to show its numbers, and this was going to be the big bust up. The question is, were people misled? Did they misunderstand what was being communicated by Pakatan Harapan and particularly Anwar Ibrahim in the lead up to this particular vote?
No, I don't think so. There will be eventually a face-off, just not today. Because as I said just now, after this there will be many opportunities to test the confidence in the government and the support in the government at every stage. After this, we will have something like maybe 30 ministries, I think, and also the final vote, which will take place on the 15th of December. So at that time, there could be at any time at our own choosing where we may conduct this test. If you remember in 2019, UMNO MPs actually tried to vote down the budget. It was during, I remember it was a night vote at that time, and they almost won. And when we were in opposition back in 2017, we almost won. We almost defeated government budget, but we lost at that time by one vote. So, you know, you could say that a battle today has ended, but the war is still going on.
Can I ask you about the thought process? I mean, what actually happened today? Walk us through the timeline. Opposition leader Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, he told his bloc to stand down. As I understand it, moments before the bloc vote, and some MPs were caught by surprise. Can you explain the sudden change in this leadership decision?
Yeah, I use the analogy of some kind of a battlefield. Actually, we had our own party pre-council and earlier this week, and we were instructed that while we are aiming for a vote, but it may change depending on the final calculation and the final assessment of the leadership, and we stuck to that decision. Of course, when you have 107, 108 MPs, 108 on the opposition side. Perhaps somewhere down the line, some of this is maybe not as clearly heard or understood. So that's why you saw, I mean, if you look at some footage, you can see some MPs standing up, but then they sat down because the line of sight, it makes it a little bit fuzzy. We can't really see each other because of these barriers. Some people don't read WhatsApp messages, but we tried to coordinate and communicate as well as we could. It was really only at the very last minute that the party whips, the coordinators among the different parties, made the call. And unfortunately, I think some did not hear the instructions at that time.
Fahmi, I understand from the post-Parliament press conference Anwar Ibrahim gave along with Mat Sabu and Lim Guan Eng, he mentioned meeting with all the MPs and explaining what had happened. He mentioned 91 MPs. I'm wondering about this other discussion that's that in order for Pakatan Harapan or the federal opposition to work and to defeat the government of the day, they actually needed help from UMNO, or at least a faction of UMNO. And from what transpired today, it looks like UMNO is solidly behind Muhyiddin Yassin. Is that what happened? Did UMNO fail to deliver? One faction of UMNO failed to deliver to Anwar Ibrahim?
Did they? I'm not so sure. We never really tested that today. So I think the guessing game will continue for a little while longer. But as I said, today there was a battle, but the war wages on. And what's quite critical is, I think, the response that some of the MPs gave. Perhaps we need to take this opportunity over the weekend to really scrutinize what Tengku Zafrul really meant by some of the announcements he made. For example, on EPF, I raised a point on the issue of frontliners. What did he mean? Hospital cleaners, are they considered frontliners? They're not, evidently.
Right. So, Fahmi, I understand that there's a question of getting more detail, the question of the granularity of some of the proposals made today by Tengku Zafrul not there, and you want that clarified. But Anwar Ibrahim, in his post-parliamentary press conference, says that in its essence, the budget 2021 is wrong. It's an emphasis in its calculations, in its budget projections. So what will change between now and the 17th of December that will make you decide one way or the other? If it's in its design wrong-headed, how would you support it even, down the line?
Yeah. When we need to see exactly where these numbers are coming from. There are things that we have from the get-go already said that we disagree with. For example, the projections on the collection of corporate and personal income tax, which I think is wildly optimistic. But right now, when it comes to certain things, like not only emoluments for frontliners, wages and allowances, but I think we need to really look at some of the other pronouncements made today. That's why, for us, some of the pronouncements were not really unwelcomed. For example, the support and assistance given to fishermen, to petani, nelayan, the community that we feel need to be supported more. But at the same time, in the 6 items that we highlighted to Tengku Zafrul in our meeting with him on the 1st of November, this is where I think we will check against that and finally make a decision in the coming weeks.
Well, Fahmi, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. Now, we reached out to many other MPs and you were the only one to say yes to us tonight, so thank you. We're going to take a quick break here on Consider This and we'll be right back with more, so stay tuned.
Perang COVID-19 masih belum berakhir. Dalam kita berusaha memutuskan rantaian wabak ini, kita jangan terpedaya dengan virus maklumat palsu. Simak fakta melalui www.astroawani.com atau aplikasi Astro Awani. Teruskan berdisiplin, ratakan lengkungan pandemik ini.
The third wave of COVID-19 has taken us by storm. There's no room to take anything lightly. Everyone must follow all the steps to stop the spread of COVID-19. Social distancing, face masks, follow these steps, this SOP with the utmost discipline. Together, we can flatten the curve.
Perang COVID-19 tetap belum berakhir. Pastikan setiap langkah berjaga-jaga diamalkan, dari kebersihan tangan, pemakaian pelitup muka, penjarakan fizikal. Kesemuanya amat penting untuk pastikan pandemik ini dibendung.
Fokus kita sekarang adalah gelombang ketiga. Elakkan 3S, iaitu kawasan yang sesak.
Hi, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. With me is Sharaad Kuttan. Let's continue our conversation about what happened in Dewan Rakyat today. Bridget Welsh, with Asia Research Institute at the University of Nottingham, Malaysia, joins us on the show now. Good evening, Bridget. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about the legitimacy of this government, the need for a de facto vote of confidence, and the wanting to demonstrate a claim of of having the numbers. But the budget bill was never even made it to the block voting. So I'm just wondering, Bridget, what do you think happened in Parliament today? How are you making sense of today's events?
Well, I think there are two different levels to understand what's happened. On one side, you see that Muhyiddin Yassin managed to get UMNO to come on board completely to support him during this process, and I think this was reflected a lot of some accommodations publicly in terms of the issues of the budget. But I would say behind the scenes, more private acceptance and issues on the timing of elections and other things moving forward. I think there's also a situation where the opposition under Anwar Ibrahim basically did not perform as an opposition. It didn't stand up at a key point in time when the public was watching.
Bridget, do you buy the argument made by Anwar Ibrahim that when they, listened to what Zafrul was saying, they heard a few concessions, and those concessions, considering the kind of optics and that would play out in the public, they decided to now continue with the budget process, reserving the right to reject it on the 17th of December. Do you buy that argument?
I think it's not whether or not I buy it, it's whether or not the Malaysian public buys it. And I think from the perspective of the fact that there has been an extensive debate and criticism of the budget to when the opportunity came to stand up to oppose it, I think that there clearly was a disconnect with what had been said previously and what happened today. And I think that this is going to be a very big challenge to explain to the electorate why this happened. And the arguments that are saying that are talking about small concessions and others don't fit with the role that the opposition should be playing, and in a sense of standing up for the issues that were involved in the debate, which did not happen today.
Right. Do you think that there will be repercussions from this? Do you think they will be punished for it?
I think there's high levels of disappointment among opposition supporters, and I think there's confusion of why this action was there, which the fact that they had to have a press conference to explain it to the public really shows that there was a clear disconnect between the comments that were made and the actions and what happened in terms of their behavior. And I think this has done significant damage to Pakatan Harapan, but also I think it's done damage to Anwar Ibrahim himself, because he is the one who made this decision, and I think as a leader of the opposition, was not the opposition today.
Bridget, when we look at the 13 MPs who stood up, it's interesting that Mahathir's group, a small one though it is, was solidly behind him, and he put out a statement subsequently stating in very clear terms what his principles are with regard to the government of the day. Is there kind of wishy-washiness, a kind of fuzziness on the part of Pakatan? And if there is, what do you think accounts for it?
Well, I think that, I think that one of the issues is that when they want the count to happen, they want to have the numbers to be able to be solid. And Pakatan Harapan faces a problem in that they have uncertainty in their numbers. There are divisions within the opposition coalition on how to form the different forms of a potential alternative government, and I think those things are playing behind the scenes, and I think they shape in part of what we saw today.
So the budget bill moving past policy stage was a win for Perikatan Nasional. Is this done? I know that there's still, that could be defeated at the committee stage deliberations, but is that likely, Bridget? I mean, how realistically is that to happen? Can Perikatan Nasional take this as a solid win?
First of all, I think they can take this as a solid win in the sense that it showed that Muhyiddin Yassin is successful in being able to get the voice vote. But keep in mind, this was a win that's come after significant public pressure, deals behind the scenes, the use of the mass media to promote the issues of supporting the budget. This is not something that hasn't come with an intensive battle being played. I think this is quite important to understand. I think also that given the fact that the numbers are still quite close, and the fact that there is a public and will be a public backlash for the opposition basically giving Muhyiddin Yassin a walkover, I think we might see intensive competitions and issues and contestation over the committee, and of course there still is the final reading and the final vote in December. So I think that there are steps ahead that would.
Right. So, Bridget, you reckon there are subsequent challenges to Muhyiddin Yassin's legitimacy ahead?
I think there's going to be a continued process of that. I think every bill that involves a potential vote of confidence question is always going to be a point of contestation. He's not in the clear, and I think that this is just an important victory for him. But the politics and the politicking is not going away. And I think one of the issues will be when the elections will be called. And I think there's clearly indications that there's attention towards elections by UMNO and PAS and other actors. And I think those issues are also very much on the table.
Bridget, do you think in many ways both observers and also the general public interested in politics have got it wrong in terms of legitimacy and the question of holding on to power? That it isn't about the numbers at the end of the day. It's about these rather interesting maneuvers and moments where somebody like Muhyiddin Yassin is able to demonstrate, he's able to push through a legislative agenda regardless of the shifting ground below him.
Well, I think there are still legitimate and genuine issues about legitimacy, which involve the question of mandate and the question of issues of representation and numbers. But I think we also can understand that there are two things we've seen in the Muhyiddin Yassin government. One is that he is affecting the art of the political deal. And second of all, that he uses the levers of power to stay in power. And so, and I think those two things have been quite successful, and we saw some of that being played out today.
Bridget, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. We really appreciate your time and you sharing your insights, helping us make sense of what happened in Dewan Rakyat today. Thank you. We're going to take a quick break on Consider This. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned.
Perang COVID-19 masih belum berakhir. Dalam kita berusaha memutuskan rantaian wabak ini, kita jangan terpedaya dengan virus maklumat palsu. Simak fakta melalui www.astroawani.com atau aplikasi Astro Awani. Teruskan berdisiplin, ratakan lengkungan pandemik ini.
The third wave of COVID-19 has taken us by storm. There's no room to take anything lightly. Everyone must follow all the steps to stop the spread of COVID-19. Social distancing, face masks, follow these steps, this SOP with the utmost discipline. Together, we can flatten the curve.
Perang COVID-19 tetap belum berakhir. Pastikan setiap langkah berjaga-jaga diamalkan, dari kebersihan tangan, pemakaian pelitup muka, penjarakan fizikal. Kesemuanya amat penting untuk pastikan pandemik ini dibendung.
Fokus kita sekarang adalah gelombang ketiga. Elakkan 3S, iaitu kawasan yang sesak, sempit dan
Hi, thank you for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. Joining us on the show now, we have political scientist Wong Huat. Good evening, Huat. Now, after what we saw what happened today in Dewan Rakyat, has Perikatan Nasional essentially sealed its legitimacy, in your opinion?
No. What we see is just the opposition failure rather than the government's success. Because this is just only the second reading vote, and it would have to face the committee stage, and then there is a third reading vote again. So Muhyiddin is not out of the vote, but what we have seen is a very disappointing show put up by Anwar Ibrahim.
Why do you say that? He made a case for himself and for the Pakatan Harapan, being attentive to what Tunku Zafrul was saying and therefore responding to it. I mean, last minute, no doubt, but still, do you not, are you not persuaded by his argument?
No. I think let's be frank. The opposition have two goals. One is actually to reject or to force amendment to the budget. So that's a technical ground. And the other, of course, is by rejecting the budget, overthrowing the government, the larger goal. And so if Anwar wants to do this, he would have to be consistent. And today, the situations that what we learn to some news is that because the UMNO defection is not happening, therefore he pulled back. That is really a bad argument, as what I learned. Okay. And because ultimately, you should actually push for it even that you're not going to win. And this argument about making concessions from the finance minister and therefore you should pull back, again, it doesn't make sense because ultimately, if you're going to vote for, you can vote against it, and if you're going to lose, you still have a chance. So I think most of all is that his position in the past has been signaling that this is the chance going to not just reject the budget, but also to overthrow the government. How can you turn around? And it makes the entire opposition look completely disorganized.
Could I ask you and venture perhaps a different opinion? I mean, if the opposition had in fact, say, rejected or supported the block voting, what would the optics have been that they didn't support the allocations given to farmers and to the fishermen?
They could actually have two things. One is that their choice is to reject it and make a clear case up if they lose. Then they will make a case to explain and say why, because they have better options. And the other option is just merely to abstain. So to show that the government has a smaller majority. But by voting yes and then later claiming that we have voted no in voice vote, that is very unintelligent. And you expect your audience to be as unintelligent as you are.
Chinua, do you think the shape of Malaysian parliamentary politics is changing in some dramatic way, and that what we're likely to see, not just in this round, but for the foreseeable future, is a very, very volatile, uncertain process in Parliament, where you will have battles fought at every level, instead of, these singular moments where you pass the budget or not?
It is a good thing, yes. This is what we're going to see, and it's a good thing because ultimately it means that the parliament really played a role as the body that controls the government purse. And instead of letting the government having a final say of whatever budget should be passed. So this is a good thing, and from now on we can see that we would expect the budget to be more reasonable, otherwise it stands a chance to be voted down, and I would expect some of these things to happen in the committee stage, that motions to be tabled to challenge it. And if the government resists these motions and get defeated, then the government majority would be called into questions.
Okay.
But I want to...
Sorry, if I may interrupt, if I could get you to very quickly explain what you're expecting to happen during the committee stage. I mean, are you expecting partial defeats when it comes to the budget in the committee stage?
Yes. I would expect that the government likely would suffer some defeat if they do not go along with reasonable motions. For example, for JASA, the finance minister offered to cut it to half, but we know that Tuaran MP has filed a motion to have it slashed. So when that put to vote, and we have to remember there are 30 ministries waiting to have their budgets approved. So what is the situations that if the government MPs do not have enough number and they get defeated? So the simplest way was for the government to concede and make a compromise, and then because that even you change your budget, you survive. You're not stretched. However, if you resist and then you get defeated, then it will be seen as a partial defeat, and the Prime Minister would be obliged to table a motion of confidence in himself to clear the doubt.
Chin Huat, do you think the whole question of defeating the government of the day, replacing it with a new government or previous government, if you like, is that agenda really come to an end?
I think no. The reason being that this government is threatened not only by the opposition, but also because its ally, UMNO, has not really been giving Muhyiddin full support. So anytime they would pull back and then the government would lose. The only way for Muhyiddin government to look very secure is to reach out to the opposition, strike for a confidence and supply agreement, so that if any time is alive or rebels in the party decide to pull its leg, it will still survive. And this is not happening yet. And going back to the potential partial defeat in that committee stage, if Muhyiddin refused to table motions of confidence in himself, the opposition can then legitimately vote down the budgets on third reading. But I want to stress one point. The reason why opposition is so much into trouble is because that they did not even bother to set up a shadow cabinet to table a shadow budget as in the past for the public to know that they actually have a better plan. What we are seeing is that the opposition so keen to grab executive power and forget its first role is to play an effective and competent opposition's job.
Right. Chin Huat, thank you so much for those insights and sharing your thoughts with us tonight. We appreciate it. That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching, and good night.